Research process is usually the most challenging one because the information we get to work with oftentimes is chaotic. So it's disjointed. You have to dig things up from, Slack mines, but the infrastructure changed drastically. So there was this whole DocOps branch of technical writing that emerged. And I think that right now it's one of the most important qualities where a technical writer can expand their expertise. And of course, AI. But smaller companies, those that are more agile, they use more cutting edge technology. So they, for example, actively adapt AI into their processes. They actively switch to new tools, new tech. They try out stuff and it rolls out much faster. Review cycle can be really different from project to project. For example, there's also a tendency, the bigger the company, the bigger their documentation stack is, the more complicated and bureaucratized the review project. In one of the projects, we actually have implemented our own AI agent and we have actually restructured documentation for this AI agent. So it was easier for it. So we made our documentation more AI friendly. So it was easier for it, for example, to create marginal cases using basic cases. A customer support manager who is in charge of all the documentation. A smaller company I also work a project for, the review process is much more simplified. We work with some industry giants and they're still stuck a little bit in tech that has been probably relevant maybe 10 years ago, but is slowing down stuff a lot right now.
Hello, I'm Rabiah Khanum, a technical writer at Xgrid, and I have been working in technical writing for the past year. In today's conversation, we will be exploring how technical documentation has evolved over the years and the real challenges the technical writers face today, and also areas such as docs as code, docs ops, and how AI are shaping modern documentation workflows. So to talk about this, I am joined by Tatyana, a technical writing professional with over 15 years of experience in the field. She has worked across different documentation setups, from proprietary tools to modern open source frameworks, and brings practical insights from working with both the large organizations and fast-moving teams. This discussion is part of our effort at Xgrid to learn from industry professionals and share real-world documentation insights with the wider community. So my first question is that how did you get into technical writing?
Well, actually, it was my very first job after I graduated from university. I majored in applied linguistics. Back then, that was, 25 years ago. Back then, I thought that it could be a good career maybe for me on the crossroads of something humanitarian like linguistics and something more technical. I then switched from technical writing into marketing, sales, digital, and I worked there. And I got back to technical writing and copywriting maybe about 10 years ago.
All right. And you have been almost in this field for almost 10 years.
Over 10 years, probably in total, maybe about 15. But 10 years continuously, the last 10 years continuously.
Okay. And what do you think has changed most in how teams like yours manage documentation? What's the biggest shift?
I think that the biggest shift that at least I observed was from proprietary software and very bulky data architectures, for example, based on Oxygen, Tridion, things like that, and custom repository solutions to open source solutions that are more flexible, that can be more integrated with developer pipelines and developer workflows. I think that was the biggest shift.
All right. And how did your current role differ from the previous role? How did that change?
Well, For me, well, I had to. I think that I had to dive a lot deeper into specifically developer processes. So when I started out, most of user documentation was written in Microsoft Word, but that was like 20 something years ago. And then there appeared specific tools for technical writers. There was a developed data architecture, but then the data principles remained. For example, things like reuse, things like same source for multiple outputs. But the infrastructure changed drastically. So there was this whole DocOps branch of technical writing that emerged. And I think that right now it's one of the most important qualities where a technical writer can expand their expertise. And of course, AI.
Yes, surely that. And you mentioned that you have a basically documentation that is structured, divided throughout the teams and different QAs, customer success and marketing, for example, teams. How has that approach of your at Orion worked? How does that work?
So where I work, we are project-based. So each project, each customer has their own documentation workflows, their own documentation processes, and I have worked at quite a few. And I can probably observe from a point where I can see how several companies handle their documentation. And one thing I can definitely say is that the bigger the company, the slower the processes are updated. For example, we work with some industry giants, and they're still stuck a little bit in tech that has been probably relevant maybe 10 years ago, but is slowing down stuff a lot right now. But smaller companies, those that are more agile, they use more cutting edge technology. So they, for example, actively adapt AI into their processes. They actively switch to new tools, new tech. They try out stuff, and it rolls out much faster.
Okay. So you think that the bigger the companies are, the scattered their docs are?
Yeah.
All right. And what is your documentation approach here at your company? What's basic, the step-by-step workflow that you follow?
You mean just like tech writing?
Yes, for example, when a new feature pops up and you
Okay.
want to add documentation for that in, for example, user guides or manuals. How do you do that?
I think that we closely follow the Pareto principle. So 80% of our work is actually not writing. So when a new feature rolls out, we for the projects that go sprint by sprint with the development. So we roll out the documentation together with the new feature. As soon as we know that it's going to be rolled out, we start gathering information. It could be really anything. Sometimes it's a demo from a developer. Sometimes it's just internal developer docs, Confluence pages. Sometimes it's Slack conversation. So anything goes as a source of information. Then we estimate how much we need to cover for this release, like how many new topics we need to create, how many topics we need to update across which documents. So we estimate all that, create a content plan. Sometimes for some projects, we need to approve a content plan before start working. For other projects, we're more independent, so we just go ahead and start writing. And then we create a draft, the reviews start. Review cycle can be really different from project to project. For example, there's also a tendency, the bigger the company, the bigger their documentation stack is, the more complicated and bureaucratized the review project is. For example, in one of the projects I work at, which is for a telecom industry giant, they have 4 rounds of review. So they have a tabletop review, they have peer review, they have an SME review, and then they have a formative review where a lot of other teams participate. So there are stakeholders, there's marketing, there's technical support. In a smaller company, I also work a project for the review process is much more simplified. So it's just a customer support manager who is in charge of all the documentation. And then sometimes I ask, so that would be me asking to an SME to review if the topic is very technical, or if I doubt that I have the complete information. And sometimes it's easier to show what you've already written for them to say, okay, this is correct, this isn't correct. I would say this is relevant, and we decided to exclude this from the release. So it can be very different.
All right. So where does the biggest challenge in that come from? Like in the review process or in the research process where you are collecting all the data from the devs?
I think that the research process is usually the most challenging one, because the information we get to work with oftentimes is chaotic. So it's disjointed. You have to dig things up from, Slack mines, or not every developer is, they're talented, extremely talented people who can work miracles with code. But when it comes to explaining what it does, they sometimes get really stuck. So it's our job to, decipher the dev speak and turn it into something that is structured, understandable. And there's also a challenge which I often saw when there's a sort of professional bias a lot of developers have. They have this outlook on their product from the inside because they know all the workings inside the project. And it's really hard for them to look at the product from the customer point of view, who is an outsider, who doesn't necessarily have all the context and doesn't need to have all the context. And sometimes, for example, developers insist, okay, so this has to be explained, like how the formulas work and how do we do these calculations, and then you have to kind of educate them a little bit, but they're smart, very professional people. And when you start telling them that it's not necessarily that a user will actually interact with all of these formulas, it may be like overwhelming them. So it's always a lot of negotiation, soft power, and trying to tell them that what they suggest may not be wrong, may not be right from the technical writing point of view and from a user manual point of view, and at the same time not to make them feel something uncomfortable.
All right. And you also mentioned in the Google form that you would like to hire a DocOps engineer. And where does that come? Like, which part of the workflow you would like to hand over to them?
So as a technical writer, I don't have a specific technical education. I did later on. I went to courses. I got additional education, but still, I'm not a trained developer. And for example, when it comes to creating a very complex pipeline on Git, let's say, right? So you want to do some automated tests for your documentation. You want to implement some cool things that would make it look better. A lot of fancy CSS sheets. Okay, I can work the CSS, but my knowledge is still basic. And you have, for example, 4, 5 different tools and like a dozen of plugins for each tool. And this is a complex infrastructure which is put together by scripts and whatnot. And there's a database, there's an AI agent that, it is, sometimes I feel like it's out of my scope. I do want to, learn all of this, but it's a lot to take in, and I'm moving in this direction. But I absolutely perfectly realize that I'm not yet that technically good. So We do get help from front-end engineers, of course, but it's not a full-time help.
And how many people are there in your team? Like, how many technical writers do you currently have?
On one project I work up to 50, but this is a distributed team throughout several branches. On the other project, it's 3.
All right. And the documentation, how does that look like? Is it embedded inside the tool, or you have a documentation repository with wikis and how-tos? How does the documentation look
For
like?
one project, we write in Oxygen, and they have their own publishing and repository tools. So they produce both an online help portal and downloadable PDFs. For the other project, it's a classic Docs as Code setup, so where we write in Visual Studio Code. We use GitLab as a repository, DocuSource as a publishing tool, and a lot of AWS services on top of that, because they're used in the developer pipeline. So they have added auto tests, like unused images checkup, and checking broken links, and a lot of stuff like that.
And you work with both of those setups.
Yeah.
And what is the difference? Basically, what is the difference in the challenges of both of those? What do you find the most difficult in there?
The first one, it's an outdated setup, so it's a proprietary software, and if you want an Oxygen update, it doesn't depend on what you want. You depend on them to release it, right? So it also costs, the licenses are really expensive, so they're not giving them out. The customer doesn't really give them out when you need more licenses. So to change anything in that setup is like a huge difficulty. And you often have to work with uncomfortable workflows because you cannot really do anything about them. The second setup is really simple in terms of change. So if you want to add something, it's open source, you just go ahead and add it. The only thing is that you have to know how to do it. And so it's either this or that. You either use an out-of-the-box tool, but you have to work with what they offer, or you either do whatever you want, but you have to do it yourself.
All right. And when your docs fall out of sync with products, like what typically causes that gap?
Usually it's because the docs started 2.5 years later after the first version of the product was released. So we're still playing catch up. And the product, it's a CI/CD product. So the new release is rolled out quickly, and we have to prioritize. Do we work with legacy content? Do we work with technical debt? Do we work with new features? So but we have a priority system. For example, the key core features come as top priority, and if one of them gets released, that's what we document first. Then marketable features, which add value to the product from the marketing point of view, come as second priority. Technical debt comes as third, and legacy comes as fourth.
Right. And do you sometimes hire outside support to bridge that gap, or push the releases closer to the product features?
Not in our company. We are already an outsourcing company, so we are the ones that usually get hired to projects outside. So it's not usually us who's doing the hiring.
All right. So the different teams, they are doing different work, and they are going to different projects. That's what I'm understanding.
Yeah.
All right.
So I work on several projects.
Oh, all right. And where have you inserted AI in all those projects? Is in the search, discovery, ability, and all that?
In one of the projects, we actually have implemented our own AI agent that, and we have actually restructured documentation for this AI agent, so it was easier for it. So we made our documentation more AI friendly. So it was easier for it, for example, to create marginal cases using basic cases. So the project I work at is very extensive and very technically difficult. So it has thousands of fine-tuned settings, and you can imagine the number of combinations these settings produce. It's very, very customizable. So it is simply impossible to describe every combination, what it does, but an AI agent helps us to do that. It took maybe a year and a half to train it to do this with some, at least a feasible level of credibility. So basically what it does is creates custom user scenarios for our product that base on regular scenarios. So imagine, like, I don't know, what would be a good example? For example, Adobe Photoshop, right? So you can do a lot of stuff, but Adobe Photoshop documentation just, mostly tells you how to work each tool separately, what it does, how it takes it from point A to point B. But you can actually draw like a very complex picture in Adobe Photoshop. And if you know all the tools and you know what they do, you still won't be able to draw it if you don't know how to use this tool or that tool, like off-label. It's a similar thing. And AI helps our customers to do this. Not always very precisely yet, so we're getting there.
So basically, it helps connecting the dots where certain features can do what, basically.
Yeah. So it takes regular scenarios, like common scenarios, and creates marginal scenarios on their base.
And then that you can easily integrate in the documentation, but it
is already integrated in documentation. So you can, it also does, of course, search, but that's like a basic function. So you search by relevance, by whatnot, so there's several criteria, but it also helps you to, if a question is very specific, like how do I do this, this, and that at the same time, but I also have this, this, and that conditions, like what could be my limitations? And probably 70% our AI would give a correct answer.
And which model do you use for your the searchability and functions?
We use a custom model, but the basic one is from OpenAI.
All right, that's fine. And we are also developing an internal AI to solve such documentation issues, but we are at the very early stage and the hallucinations, and we are working on that stuff. So
yeah. So we found that originally our documentation was simply not AI friendly. The hallucinations were out of control, so we had to restructure the docs for AI to read them and parse them correctly.
And how did you do that?
So well, first of all, we had to remove all inconsistencies, not just in terminology, but in sentence structuring. Then we had to remove any inconsistencies in topic structure. So that's like one level above, because if one of your topics would have a bulleted list and one of your topics would have a numbered list, AI would treat those lists differently. So we also created, in like when we trained with AI, we created dependencies. For example, if you see a bulleted list, it means it is a step-by-step procedure. If you, a numbered list. If you see a bulleted list, it means that it is like maybe a list of conditions or a description of contests or options. So things like that. And then we had to add a lot of context. For example, in our product, a site is an entity within a customer tenant, a customer company. For example, it could be it is an entity that has common settings. So, and one company, one customer account can have multiple sites. But when AI originally started, doing this, it thought that a site is a website. So we had to clarify a lot of things like that, like all the terms, what they mean. So it had to be a lot of context. We had to add it into the documentation also, because for human it is evident. For AI, it is not.
Yes, and all that was a manual effort, like editing the sections and adding the stuff.
Not really. Partly automated, so of course, but with a lot of manual observation.
All right. And doing that, do you think that the documentation's effectiveness for humans decreased or it was the same?
No, I think it actually increased because it has become very uniform. And so when you see a familiar pattern, you think that, okay, so this is similar to that in the way, it may be a different feature, but in the way I can use it, in the way I interact it, is similar to that, which I already know, which I already use.
And we also are observing that people don't even bother to go to documentation. When they see a chatbot, they just ask the question they want to the chatbot and they get them.
Yeah,
so I can't really judge if they are getting benefit from reading the document or from the chatbot.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yes, and relating to our previous conversation where we were talking about contractors, how do you basically get your clients, and how do you tell them that we are providing these services? What's your pitch?
So our company is pretty huge, and we have a special marketing department. I know that we don't often get a lot of new clients right now, so we have a network of established clients. Sometimes they come to us and ask, like, okay, do you guys do that? Can you do that? And so I don't really do client acquisition, so I don't think I can enlighten you a lot on that, and for in terms of our specific company.
All right. That's all from my side, and it was very nice having a conversation with you. I learned a lot, and
Same here. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope good luck with your research, and I hope I get to read it one day. It sounds really interesting.